Hey everyone, I am Sanket Singh. I'm working as a software engineer at Google and welcome back to my channel. So guys, in this video, we are going to discuss about a very important topic that can help you to decide what can be your future goals in your career. So in this video, we are going to talk about what are the major key differences if you work as an engineer in a startup as compared to an engineer in an MNC, right? This is a question that is asked from like a lot of students of mine. A lot of people ask me that what they should focus on. I have worked in both of the environments. I have worked in like top 10 startups of India. I have worked in like top 10 MNCs of the whole world. So based on my experience and based on my what opinions do I have, I'm going to give you slight differences between how does it feel to work in a startup as compared to an MNC. We are going to discuss some very key major pointers that you can keep in your mind while choosing your next job or your next step in your career. And I believe whatever things I have to deliver in this video are completely my opinion. Things can vary based on someone else's experience also. So everything that I'm going to talk in this video, take that with a pinch of salt, because depending on what kind of MNC or startup you land in, things might get changed, right? So without any further delay, let's just start. But before starting the video, if you have not yet subscribed to my channel, please do subscribe to the channel. We are going to put lots and lots of awesome content on my channel. We have recently started putting up vlogs also, so if you have not yet watched my vlogs, so do check them out. And if you find the video useful enough, then definitely share it with your friends, and don't forget to drop a like on the video. And without any further delay, let's just start. So guys, in my experience and in my opinion, if you work in a startup, then the overall learning curve is kind of a bit steep. Why? Because when a startup hires an engineer, then they expect that starting from the day one or the day two, you can start contributing on their product. Why? Because they have very tight releases, they have their funding, they have some funding expectation or some funding timelines. They have some product based timelines that by the end of, let's say, first quarter or second quarter, they have to deliver this much product. And the overall environment is kind of fast paced. Due to that, you have to learn things as quickly as possible. And sometimes this can be a bit overwhelming as well. But when you compare this with the MNC, MNCs are kind of like far-sighted. Whatever products they are building, they have a complete and I would say very realistic timeline in their mind. So you get enough time to learn about the overall stack, the overall product, the overall feature that you are going to work in. And I believe that due to this difference, in a very small amount of time, in a startup, you get very high exposure to technology, product, and process. Whereas in an MNC, the overall exposure can take a bit some time in order to like get comparable exposure with a startup. So let's say for an example, if you consider my experience, so when I was working at InterviewBit, that's one of the top 10 startups of India, I raised my first pull request in like 2 days of joining as my full-time engineer. But as compared to like something like LinkedIn, it took me almost like a whole month to raise my first PR, because there were a lot of things and I was given a lot of time in order to grasp all the concept and take up the opportunity to pick up a feature or let's say a bug and then raise a PR for that. So based on this, you can take a judgment that if you want to work in an environment where you can learn a lot of things in a very small period of time, and that can maybe put some pressure on you, but you are not caring about that, then definitely you can take your further career in startup. Whereas if you are someone who loves to take their time in order to learn things, and even if you get the exposure a bit late, but you are comfortable enough in order to learn and explore in depth everything, then I guess MNC is going to be the way to go for. So guys, in a startup, things are people driven. What do I mean by that? In startup, you have to take very high ownership. Even if, let's say, you are a software engineer 1 or a software engineer 2, or you are an engineering manager, you have high stakes on you. You have to take ownership of very big part of the overall product, right? Whereas in an MNC, things are process driven, right? there is a specific process that if you are an SD1 or an SD2, there is a certain amount of things that you are expected to do, right? And if you are an engineering manager, then there is a certain amount of ownership that you are expected to take. Whereas in startup, even if you are an SD1, you can be asked to do work which is as comparable to a work of an SD2 or SD3, like making design docs, or like leading a complete feature of a whole product, or maybe mentoring new hires. So when I was working in a startup, so every new hire used to get a mentor, which was like, let's say only 6 month or 7 month older only. So being an SD1 also, you are having very, very high stakes, and the ownership that you have to take is very high. Whereas in MNC, there is a certain amount of process. Everyone knows that they are expected to do this much time kind of things. Even if you are releasing a feature, then in an MNC, there is a complete process that happens, right? Starting from the design doc, the reviews, the product manager reviews, there is a certain amount of timeline, there is some certain amount of steps that the whole MNC process is going to take. Whereas in startup, things are so fast paced that as an individual, you have to be the driving force for the overall process. That's why things are a bit people driven. The startups need more enthusiastic people, more the people who are having more energy and more dedication and passion towards their work. Whereas in MNC, because the things are process driven, they need people who kind of inculcate in whatever process the corresponding company has, and then work as an overall team, and based on what they are expected, they take the ownership. So this is my opinion on what kind of process and people startup and MNC.
Here I would like to introduce to you to the YouTube channel of CodeTribe, where along with me, several other industry experts who are working at companies like Google, LinkedIn, Microsoft, Amazon are teaching for free. All of these lectures are very in-depth and include wide variety of topics in programming, including concepts of data structures and algorithms, along with language basics of Java, C++, and Python as well. Here you can see we are putting tons and tons of hours of content which is available for free, which include all the live lectures. As you can see here, Vishwa Mohan, who is an 10-year experienced software engineer working at LinkedIn teaching Java. Here you can see I am teaching C++ in a 4-hour session where we discussed about very much in-depth concepts of C++, including compilation concepts as well. And here you can see some lectures around recursion and backtracking that is taken by me. All of these lectures are live and put on the channel of CodeTribe, and we are also going to very soon put recorded video sessions around languages and data structures and algorithmic basics that you can find in all of the playlists given below. So what are you waiting for? Just go and subscribe to the channel of CodeTribe and hit that bell icon so that you never miss any notification about any lecture that we are going to put on the channel.
So guys, working as an engineer in like a startup also and in an MNC also, what I have felt is in an MNC, the pay gap is very less between someone who is coming from, let's say, a tier 1 college or a tier 2 college or a tier 3 college, right? Let's say in India, this tier of college things exist. So if you will work in an MNC, generally the whole company will treat everyone, like even if you are from an IIT or from DTU or from your state colleges, if you are having comparable skills, then the pay gap will be almost negligible, right? Even if you are coming from an IIT, the companies are going to pay you equivalent to what a person is going to get from a normal state college. But what I have felt is in startups, things are not that same. If you are coming with good brand name or a very good or very high experience, or let's say you are someone very known in the overall community, then startup tries to like sometime pay even higher than their overall general bar. Like let's say the whole team of SD1 are having X as the salary package, then sometimes the people who are coming from very high tags, they can even get X plus 0.1 of X, that is a slightly higher pay can be there, right? So like this is something that I have felt in startup. Maybe you might be having some different opinions on that, but I believe this is something that do exist in startups. Apart from that, what I believe is overall perks that you see is very less in startups when compared to an MNC. So let's just take an example. If MNC pays you X amount, then apart from that X, they are going to pay you Y amount that you are eventually going to spend even if they give you a cash component of Y, let's say in insurances or in traveling, so on and so forth. So they give you those kind of amenities with respect to that. Whereas if you go in a startup, so people are having that notion that startups pay very high. Now the problem with that is they don't give any kind of perks. Like perks are significantly less and the process is significantly less in a startup, I believe. So even if they give you higher cash component, then also you are going to spend a very big chunk of that in taxes and getting the same amenities that an engineer in an MNC is going to get. And nowadays, I have felt that if you are like not at a very, let's say top 5 or top 7 kind of startup, then all the medium level startups sometimes even pay lesser than an MNC. This is something that I have felt. So while working at companies like LinkedIn and Google, I felt the fact that they focus on overall development of their employee. They don't just focus on the fact that they have to build a product and they have hired someone and they are just going to do a work like a machine. They want to build up an overall individual, an overall engineer out of someone who is getting hired at their company. Whereas in a startup, people are more focused on just building. They are like builders. They are like building a very big product in a very small period of time. So that's why sometimes they don't evolve overall as an engineer. Like there are a lot of things apart from writing code as a software engineer. You have to do a lot of things like managing team, writing design docs, writing documentations. A lot of things are there. But in a startup, I believe that things gets sidelined sometimes. So this was my opinion on what are the pay and the perk based differences in MNC and startup. Now what I believe is in an MNC, due to the fact that there is a whole process with which you are going to work always, the overall code architecture and the code quality is significantly high. You cannot write dirty code and get it submitted in production. There are multiple level of reviews that exist in MNCs. Right. Whereas when you compare this with startups are more focused on getting their features out. Even if sometimes they have to like hamper the overall code, then also they believe that the release of a feature is having a higher stake rather than writing a cleaner code in that feature. So let's just take an example. So I have felt the fact that writing unit tests is very, very important in MNC because writing unit tests helps you to handle overall edge cases of the overall feature that you're writing. But unit tests are time consuming and startups tend to avoid that. Due to this, they also face a lot of bugs in production. But their priority is different. Their priority is to get the feature released and iteratively they will improve the feature. Whereas in an MNC, due to the fact that a lot of people are going to use their product, they want to, even if they have to take a bit of time, they will set realistic timelines and based on that, they are going to write as good code as possible, as good feature as possible, right? Because let's say if Gmail goes down, then that's a whole news in the whole world that Gmail was down today due to some bug or something like that. Whereas if there's a small startup here in India and their app goes down, that might not be a highlight in the news. And due to the fact that there are a lot of stakeholders involved, they have stock, MNCs have their stocks in the stock market, they can face a significant loss if they have a big outage in their overall software. So that's what I feel is the overall architecture, the overall coding practices, the overall software engineering practices are better in MNC. Although due to this, it takes a lot of time to build a single feature. Like you can build a whole feature in 3 days, maybe in startup, and that can even take 2 weeks in an MNC. But the feature that you are going to make is going to be almost 100% very, very good, I must say. And if you go in a startup and see the same feature, then it can face a bug. And iteratively, you are also going to take 2.5 week to iteratively improve it. But they tend to release the feature earlier. So if you are someone who are looking for very good coding practices, you are someone who wants someone to mentor you, who wants to get their code reviewed and learn from the fact that how they can write better code, then MNC is the way to go for. Otherwise, if you are someone who is more of having a builder kind of passion and want to build more features in a product in a less period of time and then iteratively improve it, then startup is the way to go for. So what I believe is that in startups, the overall hiring of engineers is not having a very good gender ratio. I have specifically seen this kind of a thing, that in startups the gender ratio is not that good, but MNCs do consider the fact that due to diversity they will be able to make better products, right? And due to this fact, not even the gender ratio but overall diversity of different people, let's say people, there are a lot of people living in different countries who are considered let's say diverse population. They try to like hire those kind of people also, because they know that their product is not going to be used by a single segment of the society. They know the fact that the whole society is going to use the product, so they want the thinking process, they want the inculcation and inclusivity of the overall society, not just a single individual. Whereas startups don't think about that, because their main focus is on feature development and the initial product release. Due to this fact, the gender ratio is a bit less in startups. Like good gender ratio, you will be finding very less companies, very less startups having very good gender ratio. But in MNCs, the MNCs are at least trying to make it better. I must say that it is still not that good in MNCs, but they are at least trying. They are having specific diversity hirings. They have special amenities for women, so and other part of the society. So this is something is a very important feature that you will see in MNCs and startups. Apart from that, if you talk about leadership, I believe in MNC there is a proper hierarchy that exists, right? So you are an SD1, then there is an SD2, then there is an SD3, then there is a staff engineer, principal engineer, engineering manager, senior engineering manager, director, so on and so forth. So there is a whole hierarchy. Due to this fact, the overall process is really good. Although it takes a lot of time to get things reviewed, get things approved, but due to this fact, the overall hierarchy remains really good, and the overall leadership, there is a specific segment of the leaders like people who are handling the overall leadership, and they definitely do their job really well. Whereas in startup, this hierarchy doesn't exist. You can directly interact with the CEO of the startup. Although this can be considered good and bad as in both perspective, because if you are able to interact with the CEO of a startup who is having a lot of experience, then you will be able to learn a lot of things. But due to this, sometimes what can happen is the leadership, because there's going to be a dedicated leader team, or let's say a team lead kind of a thing, then you will be able to find a lack of leadership and lack of driving force there. Sometimes it can happen, because I have experienced this once. So this is overall my opinion on leadership and diversity hiring and the overall inclusivity of different segment of society in companies and like MNCs and startups. So if you talk about work-life balance, then I believe the work-life balance is really good in an MNC when compared to a startup, because in startup things are a lot fast-paced and you might be asked to work extended hours, although they will pay you more, but they will be asking you to work for extended hours. Sometimes I have also seen people are working on weekends, whereas in an MNC there is a whole process. Everyone wants their employees' mental health to be as good as possible. So if you will talk about me at LinkedIn, my manager used to say me that, Sanket, please try to avoid opening your laptop on the weekends until or unless something like the whole linkedin.com is going to crash. If something there is an outage of that kind of level, then definitely you should do that. That is your I would say responsibility. But apart from that, there is no point of stretching yourself to overextended limits, because that is going to hamper your productivity in the longer run. So overall work-life balance is really good in MNC when you compare that with a startup. But again, if you talk about other extra benefits, so you can say that the overall working hours can be dependent on company to company. So there can be some companies or MNCs that have more working hours than some startups also. So this can be subject to what kind of startup or companies or MNCs you are working with, right? Apart from that, there are some extra benefits that a lot of startups and MNCs both are providing, like free food or food availability in their campuses or offices. That is really important because the employee is going to spend a very big amount of time of the whole day in the office. So things like free food are there and some extra benefits are also there. But if you will overall talk about the perks like insurances, leaves and other benefits, gifts, these kind of things are, I would say, slightly better in an MNC when compared to a startup. So due to this overall coronavirus situation, a lot of people were able to understand one thing, that jobs can be at risk at any point of time. Now talking about job risk, I believe that there is a higher chance of like getting fired, or let's say a mass layoff being done at a startup when compared to a very, very big MNC. So there were a lot of companies during coronavirus who laid off a lot of employees, whereas there were a lot of companies and MNCs also that did the same thing. But if you will overall talk about in terms of like pay cut and the overall layoff scenario that existed, then big MNCs overall bigger MNCs like LinkedIn, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, they didn't do anything like that, like pay cut or like layoff. There were very small layoffs in some companies as well, like Airbnb. But again, the very big tech giants or very big fintech giants were not doing that. But you compare that with a startup, that's a small scale startup, then pay cut was at least the thing that was very, very common during the first wave or the second wave of coronavirus. And I believe if you want I would say stable job and lesser job risk, then you should definitely prefer MNC when compared to a startup. So guys, what I believe is, in an MNC, the documentation is something that is of very high value. People give a lot of focus to the documentation and overall docs of the whatever feature or product that you're building. But that's not the case with startup. I have seen a lot of time that startup don't focus on good documentation, and if some engineer built a feature and they left the company, then the people who are going to later maintain it find some difficulty in that. But that's not the case with MNCs. But I believe that startups try to inculcate more open source softwares, right? Open source free software. So even if you are writing a code, you will get very good docs online on the internet so that you can understand what is going on in the future. Whereas in a company, or like let's say MNCs like Amazon, Microsoft or LinkedIn, they don't use exactly very famous open source softwares. They make their own proprietary libraries, own proprietary softwares, and sometimes make them open source, but they are not that famous, right? So even like things like databases, so you might have heard about databases like MySQL, PGSQL, MongoDB, but there is a very huge chance that when you land up in an MNC like LinkedIn or Microsoft or Amazon, then you will be working on database in-house built by the corresponding company. And similar things happen with languages and frameworks also. So if you talk about me, the overall coding experience, if you are an open source enthusiast, is going to be really good in a startup when compared to an MNC. But as soon as you get comfortable with the overall tech stack of MNC, that is also going to be a cakewalk later when you are going to build features later. But again, you will not find a lot of tutorials for that proprietary libraries that MNCs are going to use. So you have to learn using their docs only. And that is one of the most foremost reason that they focus a lot on documentation. Whereas the overall technology that a startup is using is going to be very famous open source software. So let's say a lot of startups for their backend technology use frameworks like Django, Ruby on Rails, Express. So these are very famous frameworks, and you will be finding a lot of good documentation, a lot of good video tutorials and YouTube tutorials for that. So I believe this is one of the very important factors that you need to consider if you are taking up your career in a startup or an MNC as an engineer. So guys, these were some opinions and some pointers that I would like to put forward in front of you guys when you compare your career in a startup or an MNC. There can be a few more points that I might have missed. So if you know some more points, do drop that in the comment below. And if you find that this video useful, then don't forget to share it with your friends, because this will give us the support and the motivation that we need in order to put more such awesome content on this channel. We have reached 18,000 subscribers on the moment I'm recording this video, and I would like to thank all of you, the whole family, for this kind of support. Let's scale it up as fast as possible. Let's just reach the next goal of 25k, 50k as soon as possible, and this is going to be possible by the effort of you guys only, and by the effort of my team also. So at this moment, I would also like to acknowledge my team of the editors and the friends who are helping me in building the overall content of this channel, and special thanks to you guys also who are watching the videos and sharing the video. So don't forget to share this video also, don't forget to like the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon so that you get some notification whenever I'm going to put a new video. And if you want to enjoy more such vlogs, so we are also going to put more vlogs on this channel, so do drop some comments regarding that also if you want more such vlogs and more such informative content like this. We will be meeting very soon in the next video. Till then, take care guys, bye bye, have a great week ahead, and love you all.